Antonio Delgado had once believed in quiet strength. Raised in a modest Puerto Rican household in Queens, he watched his father scrub stains in a laundromat while his mother mopped strangers' floors. Life was hard, but he was harder. He clung to the belief that if you worked, if you loved your family, you could build something that lasted. He married Suzanne Morales when he was 23. She was everything he wasn't. College-educated, sharp, ambitious. But she saw something in his unyielding loyalty. They weren't rich, but they had each other. Within 3 years, they had 2 children. Tony first, then Janelia. They split shifts to avoid daycare, living on exhausted kisses and late-night leftovers. Antonio fixed what broke. Suzanne paid the bills. They fought quietly. They loved hard. But life doesn't negotiate. When Suzanne was diagnosed with cervical cancer, everything began to rot from the inside. The savings disappeared into hospital bills. Outings became appointments. Her laughter faded. And then, one night, she was gone. Janelia was 10. Antonio. Broke. But he didn't fall. He cried behind locked bathroom doors, washed his face, and made scrambled eggs. The world didn't care about grief. Rent was due. Lunchboxes needed packing. He found a job as a maintenance man in a factory in Flatbush, fixing busted machines under flickering lights. The work was thankless, the pay humiliating, but it was steady, and it kept them alive. Tony admired his father, but felt the weight early. His friends partied, dated, lived. Tony worked. He skipped parties to patch leaks and carry bags of rice home. At 15, he passed out pizza flyers. At 17, he was unloading cargo. By 20, he managed a warehouse floor and made more than his father ever had. He wanted to leave, to breathe, but couldn't. Antonio needed him, and Janelia. Janelia was always elsewhere. She was beautiful and cold. From the beginning, Janelia moved through the world like it owed her something. Where Tony stepped up, she drifted. Where Antonio gave, she took. She hated the peeling paint, the hand-me-downs, the apartment that smelled like cleaning chemicals and poverty. She drowned herself in Instagram feeds and makeup tutorials. She wanted to be seen. Not helped, not loved, seen. At 16, she started posting photos. Pouted lips, crop tops. Poses that made Antonio clench his jaw. He confronted her once. She didn't argue. She mocked him. It's just Instagram, you wouldn't get it. By 17, she was sneaking out. Her friends were strangers. Her secrets were deep. Once, Antonio found lingerie in her backpack. It's for me, she said flatly. Don't be weird. Tony noticed too. The distance, the indifference. She forgot his birthday, missed his graduation. When he bought her a phone with 3 weeks' pay, she barely looked up from her screen. They were siblings by name only. When Janelia turned 18, she announced she wanted to help with bills. Antonio beamed. That's my girl, he said. But she didn't fill out job applications. She researched. Deep dives into forums, subreddits, gig work, influencer culture. And then OnlyFans, cam sites, escorting platforms. She was curious at first, then hungry. Validation, attention, power. It was a drug. Sex wasn't sacred to her. It was currency. She created a fake name, bought cheap lighting, took photos. The money trickled in, $50, $100, small bites. Not enough. The rent was still late. So she escalated. Private chats turned into video sessions. Then came the requests for in-person meetings. She hesitated, then didn't. Her first client met her in a Crown Heights hotel. Businessman, late 40s. 3 hours, $1,800. She walked out feeling electric. That night, she counted the bills in bed like a child counting candy. The next day, she stocked the fridge and told Antonio she was freelancing for an overseas company. He believed her. Why wouldn't he? She became meticulous, wiped her phones, deleted chats, booked rooms under different names. But arrogance breeds carelessness. It started to fall apart on a Thursday. It was raining. Tony had come home early from work, stomach flu, pale and weak. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he was, and what he saw changed everything. He opened the door and heard low, rhythmic moans. At first he assumed the TV had been left on. But as he stepped further into the apartment, what he saw stopped him cold. Janelia, half-dressed, was whispering filthy lines into a webcam, her voice syrupy and practiced. Her eyes locked on the camera like it was the only thing that mattered. The room was lit by a cheap ring light, her phone perched on a tripod. She was live, performing for strangers behind a paywall. He stood frozen. She gasped when she saw him, pulled her top up like it mattered. "Tony," she stammered. "What? The fuck is this?" he barked, his voice loud, trembling with disbelief and fury. She hesitated, then confessed, just like that. Calm, unapologetic. She told him everything, from her first tips online to the hotel rooms, the private clients, the thousands in cash. "We're broke," she said flatly. "And this works." Tony slapped her. Hard. She stumbled, but didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Instead, she reached into her drawer and pulled out a wad of bills, $3,000 in cash. Then she opened her banking app and showed him her balance. His stomach dropped. "That's more than I make in 2 months," he whispered. She wasn't done. "In-person pays 10 times more," she said. "The clients are loaded, and they tip for special things." Tony didn't say a word. Not that night, not the next morning. But by Saturday, the silence had calcified into something heavier, something final. He had made a decision, and everything began to unravel. The apartment became unbearable in the days that followed. The air was thick. Neither one of them spoke, but the tension was suffocating. He couldn't look at her. She didn't bother defending herself. He hated what she was doing, but even worse, he hated the flicker of curiosity he felt. Tony had spent his life being the reliable one, folding laundry at midnight, fixing leaks, saying no to dreams because the rent was due. He wasn't ambitious, just dutiful, a man slowly crushed under the weight of decency. But now, there was that stack of money on her dresser, just lying there, raw, powerful, real. He thought of the summer he worked 70-hour weeks to afford a bed frame, and here she was, making more in one night than he did in a month. Janelia didn't plead for understanding. She'd already made peace with herself. She didn't see shame, only survival. She was done pretending, done apologizing for wanting, out of their decaying apartment, and out of the cycle of watching their father crawl home after 12-hour shifts with blistered feet. She didn't want pity. She wanted out. 3 days passed in silence. Then one night, as Tony scrolled numbly through his phone in the living room, Janelia sat across from him, legs pulled to her chest like a little girl. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "I'm not trying to make you agree with me," she said. "I just want you to understand." Still, he said nothing. "I tried to do it right. Sent out 5 applications last month. No one called. Went to 2 interviews. They told me I need a degree. A degree I'll never afford." She shifted closer. "I'm not stupid, Tony. I know what this is. But I'm not some victim. I'm doing this because it works. Because I'm tired of waiting for life to hand me something. I'm making a choice." He finally looked at her, his face hollow. "So you think turning tricks is winning?" She didn't blink. "You think killing yourself for $200 a month is?" The words hit him like a punch. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. And she knew it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want your help," she said. He frowned. "I can't keep doing this blind. I need someone who can keep me safe. Someone who knows how to read people. I've seen the guys you work with. Some of them have money, right?" He stared at her, stunned. "I'm not asking you to sell me," she said. "I'm asking you to protect me. You screen them. You set the rules. I don't meet anyone unless you say it's okay." Tony ran a hand through his hair. "You're insane. I'm strategic." He walked away without saying a word. But the seed had been planted. That night, as he lay on his worn-out mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, he couldn't stop the thoughts. What if this could work? What if this was the way out? The debts, The late rent, the endless grind. Maybe this was how they got ahead. Maybe morality was a luxury they couldn't afford anymore. It haunted him, not just the offer, but how tempting it felt. In the days that followed, her words followed him everywhere. In the grocery store line, counting out change for eggs. Watching their father rub his swollen ankles. Listening to the landlord's threats on the answering machine. Every time he tried to ignore it, life reminded him why he couldn't. And on Friday, he caved. He didn't say much, just walked into her room, closed the door and sat down. "You follow every rule I give you," he said. "No exceptions." She nodded, eyes already gleaming. "No shady motels, no drugs, no gang members. I get final say on who you meet, and we never let Dad find out." Janelia smiled. Deal. Tony felt something tighten in his chest. He couldn't tell if he'd saved her or destroyed her. Tony set up a burner phone and a fake email under the name Lance. Janelia became Sierra, a polished high-end companion marketed to wealthy men who wanted discretion. Tony had contacts, truckers, warehouse, distributors, a few clients from his old job who bragged about their fun on the road. He probed the network quietly, dropping hints, offering something new. A model only available by referral. Private, premium. No questions asked. The first client was Arthur, a divorced 52-year-old logistics executive from Jersey who passed through Brooklyn twice a month. He was clean, polite, paid $1,500 for a night, no negotiation. Tony spent 2 hours vetting him, confirming his ID, employment, and personal details. Cautious, calculated. Janelia met him at a mid-range hotel under an alias. When she returned, she looked relaxed, flushed cheeks, a slight grin. He was gentle, she said. Talked more than he touched. Left a $200 tip. The next client wasn't gentle, but he paid double. From there, it spiraled. Within a week, Janelia had 5 regulars. Tony kept everything organized. Burner phones, encrypted chats, spreadsheets tracking preferences, rates, scheduling. A business, cold and precise. In 12 days, they cleared $10,200. They paid rent, caught up on the electric bill, stocked the fridge, upgraded their phones. Janelia bought a sleek laptop and began dressing like someone who belonged in high places. Tony bought a second-hand car that didn't scream poverty. For the first time in years, they exhaled. But Antonio noticed. One morning, he squinted at the brand-new flat screen mounted on the wall. "Where's all this coming from?" Tony didn't flinch. "Got promoted. They moved me to assistant manager. Pays better." Janelia chimed in, not missing a beat. "I'm doing part-time copywriting online. Some health site, they pay in dollars." Antonio smiled, eyes soft with pride. "You two are something else," he said. "Your mother would have been proud." They smiled back, but it was hollow, because underneath the laughter, something had started to rot. As the money grew, so did their risks. Tony dug deeper into escort networks, chasing higher-paying clients. Janelia started experimenting. Fetishes, niche services, men who wanted more than conversation. $1,000 extra, sometimes more. They rationalized it. They weren't criminals. They were survivors, entrepreneurs, providers. And for a while, that lie felt close enough to the truth. But morality doesn't disappear. It decays, quietly, like mold in the walls. Tony felt it most at night, in the silence, when all he could hear was the buzz of the ceiling fan and the echo of Janelia's laugh in some stranger's hotel room. The money, the smells, the cheap aftershave on stained $100 bills, it haunted him. But they were too deep, and Antonio was about to find out just how deep. Antonio Delgado had grown used to silence. After decades of working in factories filled with hammering steel and whining machines, he'd learned to savor quiet. He'd sit for hours on their splintered, third-floor balcony, sipping coffee, watching the neighborhood slip by like a fading photograph, pretending just for a moment that things were normal, that Suzanne was still alive, cooking rice and beans in the kitchen, that Tony was off studying, that Janelia was painting her nails instead of disappearing in short skirts and tight tops. But things weren't normal, and Antonio, though slow to anger, wasn't blind. It started with patterns. Tony, always up, by 7:15, began sleeping in. Some days, Antonio would come home early and find him still in pajamas, scrolling through his phone, unshaved and aimless. "Why aren't you at work?" he asked once. "Shift got canceled." Tony shrugged. "Warehouse. Reschedule. Another time. Remote assignment." Manager training. None of the stories matched. Janelia, meanwhile, was glowing. Too much. Nails always fresh, phone brand new. She smelled like imported perfume and wore gold chains Antonio hadn't seen before. She laughed more, walked taller, like someone carrying something she didn't plan to share. One afternoon, Antonio opened the fridge and found it full. Real full. Imported cheeses, energy drinks, frozen steaks. Food they never bought, food they couldn't afford. He chuckled and said, "Did I win a lottery in my sleep?" Tony laughed. "Just working harder, Dad." Janelia, sipping iced coffee in the corner, added, "My freelance gig pays in dollars, adds up fast." Antonio nodded. He didn't press. He believed in space, in trust. But doubt is like rust. It spreads into every quiet moment, every unanswered question. The truth hit 2 weeks later. It was a Monday. The factory lost power. He was sent home early. Around 2:30, tired and sunburned, he turned the corner near their apartment building and froze. Tony stood on the sidewalk talking to a man Antonio had never seen before. Ming, to late 50s, balding, wearing a tailored suit and a watch that cost more than a month's rent. They shook hands. Tony slipped him a key card. The man nodded and walked inside. Antonio ducked behind a parked van, heart racing. Tony didn't see him. The man entered the building like he'd done it a dozen times. Antonio waited. When Tony turned the corner and disappeared from view, Antonio followed. Slowly. His hands were shaking, breath shallow, every dark possibility ran through his head, but he still hadn't settled on the worst. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and paused. He used the spare key, the one Tony and Janelia didn't know he still had. The apartment was quiet except for soft jazz drifting from upstairs. Somewhere above, he caught the low murmur of voices, a giggle, then a moan. Antonio moved through the narrow hallway, past the cluttered kitchen and cramped living room. Every step toward the stairs felt like dragging chains. His legs were heavy, as if warning him not to continue. But he did, slowly, 1 foot at a time. At the top, the bedroom door was slightly ajar. He leaned forward just enough to see, and the world stopped. His daughter, his Janelia, was straddling an older man, dressed in black lace, laughing quietly, whispering something into his ear. The man's hands gripped her waist like she was a possession, not a person. Antonio didn't feel his heart anymore, only a numb, icy pressure radiating through his spine. He didn't speak, didn't move, didn't scream. He stepped back silently, descended the stairs like a shadow, and sat on the edge of the couch. Everything blurred around him. It couldn't be real, not her, not his son setting this up, not this house, their home, turned into this. He thought of Suzanne. Her face flashed across his mind like a knife. She would have seen it. She would have stopped it. She would never have let this rot grow in the walls of their family. He had failed her. Antonio stood, slowly. His knees almost gave out. He walked to his bedroom and opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside was a metal case he hadn't touched in more than a decade. His old Smith & Wesson revolver, clean, unloaded. He'd kept it for emergencies. Today, he had one. With trembling hands, he opened a box of ammunition from the closet. Each bullet slid into the chamber with a hard, deliberate click. He retrieved a coil of thick rope from beneath the kitchen sink, the kind used when tying furniture during their last move. Then he climbed the stairs again. This time, he didn't creep. He kicked the door open. The man screamed. Janelia shrieked, grabbing the sheet to cover herself, eyes wide in horror. Lipstick smeared across her face. "Dad!" Antonio didn't flinch. He raised the revolver and pointed it at the man. "Don't move," he said, voice low and cold. "Sir, I didn't know," the man stammered. "Shut up," Janelia tried to speak. "Dad, please, I can explain. You sold your soul," he said, eyes dead. Now it's time to pay. He crossed the room, wrapped the rope around the man's wrists, and tied it off tight. The man whimpered. Antonio didn't look at him again. Janelia sobbed, pleading, "Please don't hurt him." "You're worried about him?" Antonio barked. "What about me? What about your mother? What about everything we gave you?" Her tears meant nothing now. He dragged the man downstairs, shirtless, trembling, barely able to walk. Janelia stumbled behind them in a robe, barefoot, crying. Tony, still on the couch with headphones on, looked up and bolted upright. "Dad, what the hell?" Antonio dropped the older man to the floor and turned on his son. "You lying piece of shit," he snarled, slapping Tony hard enough to knock him sideways. "You pimped out your own sister for money?" Tony stared, speechless. "You let her do this? You helped her?" "We were broke," Tony muttered. "We needed the money." Antonio let out a cracked, bitter laugh. "That's what she said upstairs. It was the only option. And you just went along with it?" His voice dropped. "You coward." He yanked the phone from Tony's hand. The screen was still open, Facebook, videos, memes, scrolling endlessly. Antonio stared at it. Something inside him snapped. "You're watching videos," he said quietly. He looked up at the room. The old man, tied, bleeding, terrified. Janelia, shaking in the corner, robe clutched tight, face streaked with tears. Tony, sitting in silence, defeated. "Let's make our own," Antonio whispered. Tony's eyes went wide. "No, Dad, don't, please." But Antonio had already tapped the screen. The countdown flashed. 3, 2, 1. The red live icon blinked. Within seconds, dozens of his friends and relatives were notified. Some clicked out of habit, expecting another of Antonio's rambling rants about politics or factory pay. None of them were ready. Antonio stood in the center of the frame, shirt soaked with sweat, hands trembling slightly as he gripped the revolver. Behind him were three figures. Janelia, tied to a dining chair, her face ghostly white, mascara smeared across her cheeks. Tony, bound next to her, his mouth trembling, eyes swollen and red. And the older man, bloodied, duct-taped on the floor, shaking like a leaf. No one watching could yet understand what they were seeing. But in moments they would. Antonio took a slow, deep breath. "Everyone watching," he began, his voice low and hollow. "I'm sorry you have to see this, but I don't have a choice anymore." The revolver trembled slightly in his hand. "My name is Antonio Delgado. Some of you know me as a friend, some as a neighbor, and many of you watched me raise my kids alone after Suzanne died." He paused, eyes distant. "I loved my wife. I love my children. I gave them everything, every ounce of strength, every dollar, every second of my life." He turned and looked at Janelia and Tony, bound and broken in the background. "And today, I found out it wasn't enough." The view count surged. Over 2,000 people had joined the Facebook live stream within 5 minutes. Friends were texting, some calling 911. One comment flashed across the screen. "Someone get to this man fast." Antonio's hand twitched again. The gun rose slightly. "Not aimed. Not yet. My daughter," he continued, "was upstairs with him, selling herself like a product. And my son, my only son, was the one arranging it, finding clients, taking payments, turning his sister into a whore." Tony sobbed, choked out a plea. "Please, Dad, we didn't mean—" "Shut up," Antonio snapped. The crack in his voice cut like glass. "You didn't mean to? You didn't mean to sell your own blood?" He turned back toward the camera, his voice quieter now, barely above a whisper. "They told me they needed money, that this was the only way, that there were no options left." He shook his head slowly. "That's a lie. I worked 16-hour shifts, gave up everything, my dreams, my health, my dignity. But I never sold my soul." The chat exploded, panic, confusion, desperation. Some thought it was a performance. Others were screaming for someone to intervene. A comment appeared from an old neighbor. "Antonio, please, don't do this, we can talk." But he wasn't listening anymore. He looked directly into the lens, his eyes fogged over, empty. There's nothing left to talk about. He turned to the older man tied to the chair, eyes sunken, face swollen from earlier blows. "This man," Antonio said, "is why girls like my daughter think this is normal. Men like him who treat women like meat, who pay to ruin someone's daughter, someone's child." He knelt down, leaned close, whispered something into the man's ear that no one else could hear. Then he stood, calm, cold. "You pay with your life." Bang. The gunshot split the silence like a cleaver. Blood sprayed across the wall. The man's body convulsed once, then went still, head slumped forward. Janelia screamed, a sound raw and feral. Tony gagged and turned away. Antonio just stared, blank-faced, like he hadn't expected it to actually happen. He turned toward Janelia. She was trembling, lips barely able to form the words. "Daddy, please." "You were supposed to be different," he said quietly. "You were supposed to rise above, to build the life your mother and I couldn't. School, love, a family," she sobbed. "We were drowning. I didn't know what else to do." "Yes, you did," he said, stepping closer. "You knew exactly what you were doing, and the worst part, you pulled your brother into it." Tony flinched. Antonio leaned and pressed his lips gently to Yanelia's forehead. "I love you, sweetheart," he whispered, "but I can't forgive you." Bang. The shot hit her square in the chest. Her mouth opened in a gasp, a single cry. Her body twisted, jerked, then went limp. Tony let out a sound that didn't sound human. "No. Please, God, no." Antonio stumbled backward. His body shook. His eyes lost whatever light had been left in them. The realization hit, heavy and final. But it was too late to turn back. The live stream continued. Over 47,000 people now watching in horror. Antonio turned toward Tony. "You were my right hand," he said. "My boy. My blood. You saw how hard I worked, and instead of protecting your sister, you joined her. You fed her to men like that." "I didn't want to," Tony cried. "I was just trying to help." "Don't lie to me," Antonio screamed. "You enjoyed it. The money. The control. You became a goddamn pimp for what? Sneakers, a second-hand car?" Tony collapsed into sobs. "I'm sorry, I swear to God, I'm sorry." Antonio's grip on the gun tightened, but his voice softened. "I died the day your mother did, and today, I bury what's left of her." He stared at Tony for a long time, his expression unreadable. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Tony closed his eyes. Bang! The bullet punched into his chest. He convulsed, hard, then slumped limp in the chair. Silence. The stream still rolled. Red live badge blinking. Blood on the walls, blood on the floor, blood in Antonio's hands. He turned to the camera one last time. "To anyone watching this," he said, barely audible, "remember this. The world doesn't destroy us all at once. It breaks us quietly, one lie at a time, one choice at a time, until the day comes when you don't recognize your own children." He raised the gun to his temple, but before he could pull the trigger, crash. The apartment door burst open. SWAT officers swarmed in, shouting over one another. Antonio was tackled to the floor. The revolver skittered across the hardwood. His cheek slammed into the boards as cold metal locked around his wrists. "Suspect secure." Room cleared. Paramedics stormed in. Flashing lights from body cams lit the blood-drenched apartment. Screams echoed as the bodies were checked. The client, dead. Janelia, dead. Tony, dead. And Antonio Delgado, lying flat on the floor, silent, staring at the ceiling, his eyes vacant, his soul gone. The Facebook live stream ended at 31 minutes and 42 seconds. Within the hour, news outlets across the country were reporting on what was being called the most disturbing live broadcast in social media history. The video, though quickly removed by moderators, had already been downloaded, mirrored, and shared tens of millions of times. It spread like a virus, through Telegram channels, Reddit threads, encrypted group chats, and eventually deep into the archives of the dark web. Antonio Delgado became a household name overnight. To some, he was a psychopath. To others, a broken man pushed past the edge. A Reddit group emerged within days, Fathers Who Snapped, where anonymous users shared confessions, near misses, and unspoken urges, all orbiting the same black hole: failure, rage, and love that turned to rot. The psychological ripple of the case didn't stop at the border. It sparked think pieces, news specials, mental health debates. But beneath the outrage, something darker festered: understanding. Antonio's trial began 6 months later. He entered the courtroom with chained wrists and a hollow stare. He pled guilty to all charges without hesitation: 3 counts of first-degree murder, illegal firearm possession, and premeditated homicide. The courtroom was filled every day: reporters, strangers, survivors from Suzanne's family, her sister, her elderly mother, some weeping, others stone-faced. Antonio had refused legal counsel at first, said there was nothing left to defend. But a public defender eventually persuaded him to cooperate, for formality, if nothing else. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, measured. He recounted everything: Suzanne's death, the years of grinding solitude, the quiet suspicion that something had cracked beneath the surface, and the moment it all snapped. "I didn't go in planning to kill them," he said, "but when I saw what they became, I knew I couldn't let it go on. I'd already lost them. They weren't my kids anymore." When asked if he regretted it, he went silent for nearly a full minute. Then he said, "I regret raising children who thought life came with shortcuts. I regret that my love didn't reach far enough to stop them. But the act itself?" Another pause. "I don't know anymore." The jury deliberated for just 2 hours. Antonio Delgado was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He didn't blink when the verdict was read. The apartment was never cleaned out. It was sealed, left as it was on the night of the murders. Blood dried on the walls, half-eaten food rotting on the counter. The TV cracked from the struggle, bullet holes marking every decision that couldn't be undone. The landlord never rented the unit again. Neighbors whispered about the father who once walked his daughter to school with coffee in hand and a gentle smile. The same man who cried alone at the back of the church every Sunday. Tony, Janelia, and the unnamed client were buried with little ceremony. No press, no public statements. Just 3 quiet graves, barely noticed. Antonio now lives in a maximum security facility in upstate New York. He doesn't speak to the other inmates, refuses visitors, spends most of his time staring through a narrow, reinforced window, watching a sky that never changes. And the internet, it never forgets. Clips from the stream still resurface from time to time. People react, they debate, they dissect. Some are horrified, others oddly sympathetic. But none can look away, because beneath the violence, beneath the blood and screams and final gunshots, was a slower, deeper tragedy. This wasn't just a murder. It was erosion. A family crumbling in silence, choice by choice, until there was nothing left but ash, and one man who couldn't bear to sweep it up. Antonio Delgado didn't just kill his children. He killed the belief that love, by itself, is ever enough. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below.